Hello and welcome once again to my brew garage. Today I'm super excited, not that I'm not always excited for brew day, but today I'm super excited because this is the first time I have ever brewed this style, a Saison. This is meant to be more of kind of a farmhouse flavor of a beer, but we'll still kind of strive to get a little bit of sweetness in this one today. Today we're brewing what's called a Strawberry Lemon Saison, which is actually something I saw brewed on Clawhammer Supply. So we're kind of taking some inspiration from that recipe today. There are quite a few tweaks to it, so feel free to look in the description below for that. But otherwise, here's what we have cooking. This recipe calls for 7 pounds of Pilsner, 1 pound 2 ounces of Vienna Malt, and 1 pound 2 ounces of Wheat Malt. My local homebrew shop unfortunately did not have Pilsner, so we're substituting that today with Heidelberg, a slightly paler malt. For our hops, we will be using 1 ounce Fuggle, 1 ounce Styrian Goldings, and a ½ ounce of Citra. Near the end of our boil, we will be using 4 pounds 1 ounces of strawberries and 2.7 ounces of lemon rind. Right after we add our strawberry and lemon, we will also be adding 1 pound of cane sugar. For today's brew, we're using an all-grain propane system. For any of these items, feel free to look in the description below. Let's mill some grains. We start by filling up our kettle with 3.7 gallons of water. We're going to go ahead and mash in today at 153 degrees Fahrenheit. In order to achieve this, we need to heat the water to 166 degrees. While our strike water heats up to temperature, we'll go ahead and add our mashed salts. Let that continue heating up. With our water at strike temperature, we're going to go ahead and start pouring that into our mash tun. Mix it in with all our grains. And as that kind of fills up, we'll stir it all in. Make sure that we don't have any dough balls. That will hinder some of the efficiency in the process. Some predictions I have for this mash is that the pH is probably going to be pretty low, or I should say pretty high, because of the small grain bill that we have today. So we'll probably have to add some lactic acid here in about 10 minutes or so. We'll take that reading at that point. Another thing that we'll have to do as well is I have another almost gallon, I think it's 0.87 gallon, inside that I'll also have to heat up for the sparge container, since we need more than 5 gallons today due to the small grain bill. We'll be making up for that in the gravity today by adding some sugar at the end. Sugars, of course, are just for the yeast to consume, and none of that will be left behind for sweetness in the beer. That will just be to kind of add a little more dryness and alcohol to the beer. So once this is all poured in, we'll put the lid on and let it sit for 60 minutes. While we wait for the mash to finish, I've filled up the kettle with another 5 gallons of water. We're going to go ahead and start heating this up to 168 degrees Fahrenheit. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and add our salts that will be used in the sparge as well. We want to keep that water profile consistent. At the same time, inside the house, I have another 0.87 gallon that I'm going to heat up to 168 degrees, and that will be poured into the sparge container a little ways through the process, just because my sparge container only holds 5 gallons of water. Anyway, let's get this heated up. 10 minutes into our mash, we'll go ahead and take a pH reading. We want to aim between 5.2 and 5.4. Right now we're sitting a little high at 5.6, in which case we're going to go ahead and add some lactic acid to try and bring that down. Let's add some lactic acid. So as I learned from the Bubblin' Session IPA, with a low grain bill, we'll need a little bit more lactic acid than usual. I am starting off with 4 milliliters. Hopefully this won't be too much, but we're gonna go ahead and just spray that on the top. I'll mix it in, and then we'll let it sit for another 10 minutes before I take another reading. Now that it's been another 10 minutes, we'll go ahead and take another pH reading, see if we got to where we needed to go. And look at that, 5.4. It's exactly where we want to be. So 4 milliliters was the right amount of lactic acid. From here, we'll go ahead and let the mash finish and move on to the next step. As always on a brew day, you got to break out a brew. Today's brew is the Maris Otter Smash New England IPA. This is from my last video. If you want to check that out, click the link up here. But otherwise, just look at that thing. Super cloudy and hazy, and not bad on the nose either. Or the taste. Oh, that is so good. Anyway, go check it out. We'll come back once this mash is finished. Our 60-minute mash has come to an end. We're now just putting a little bit of sparge water over the top as we drain into the kettle. We're looking to hit 7.6 gallons and or a gravity of 1.036. Now that we are at a boil, I've got our 60-minute hop addition, 1 ounce of Fuggle. We'll go ahead and pour that in and make sure our heat is turned down so that we don't boil over. All right, with 5 minutes left in the boil, we're going to go ahead and add our fruit additions. That way they can be sterilized a bit before they go into the fermenter. Now that we're at the end of our 60-minute boil, we have 2 things to add before we cool this down to roughly 75 degrees for yeast pitching temp. We have 1 ounce of Styrian Golding and ½ ounce of Citra. I'm going to go ahead and pour those in. And then we're also going to mix in 1 pound of cane sugar. All right, we are now cooling this down to roughly 75 degrees Fahrenheit. While that's cooling down, we're just running some of that hot water into the fermenter with some of the other items needed, with some Star San in order to sanitize everything. Our wort is in the fermenter and it's time to add our yeast. I've opted to do a starter of OYL 500. This is Saisonstein by Omega Yeast. We'll get that all mixed up in there, dump it on in, cap it, let it ferment, and we'll be back in hopefully a week or 2 and see the final result. Hello and welcome to the tasting of the Strawberry Lemon Saison. Let's take a look at this thing. Came out kind of a nice golden, almost rose gold color. I'm assuming that's from the strawberries, kind of giving it a little red tinge in there. Give it a smell. Kind of a nice fruity but farmhousey sort of smell, like you would expect from a typical Saison. Give it a taste. Nice and soft on the palate. Is a bit dry, but plenty of flavor still packed in there. Still get kind of that farmhousey flavor, and fruit kind of comes through in that as well. But overall, just a nice, it's a smooth Saison. Very, very crushable, if you will. Some notes on this beer for you. The starting gravity was 1.048. We finished at 1.005. So a fairly dry beer overall, which is to be expected considering we did put in a pound of cane beet sugar. Overall, in the end, this comes to 5.64% alcohol content. So nice easy, mellow going beer. A big note that I wanted to mention though is if you do end up brewing this, be aware the strawberries. I kind of had an issue where the strawberries sank and then they got sucked through my cooling system. So because I use a plate chiller, caused a few issues there. Thankfully, I was still able to cool down to the temp I needed before it became a huge issue. But just something to note, maybe if you have a Wort chiller that you can pop in instead, that might be a better way to go. It's probably what I'll do if I do this one again. The other thing to note is after fermentation, cleaning the fermentation vessel was quite the nightmare. Made the mistake of doing that one in our bathtub.
You're so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
Yeah, had to use some Drano to get that unclogged. Anywho, with all that said and done, I'm glad this thing was worth the work. If you give it a shot, please let me know in the comments if you change the recipe or do anything that makes it better. Otherwise, cheers.